Hey everyone, Charles from Letta here. So Google just dropped a brand new model, Gemini 3. It's been getting a lot of attention online. I think basically because it is a complete benchmark crusher. It just destroys all of the benchmarks that most people are measuring, at least the external benchmarks. And yeah, I kind of wanted, I think it's worth going over the release notes, kind of seeing what the Gemini team kind of calls out as interesting. And yeah, I think most importantly, I also wanted to kind of do a live demo, just A/B testing Gemini 3 versus Gemini 2.5, just to see if we can kind of see using somewhat of a complex stateful agent, something that's going to try to edit memory or call tools, if you can see the difference. Because based off these benchmark scores, I think it should be detectable. And yeah, and then also comparing Gemini 3 against the other state of the art models. So I think the other kind of main point of comparison here would be like Sonnet 4.5 or GPT 5.1. So yeah, let's kind of jump straight into the blog and see what they have to say about it. All right, start building with Gemini 3. So yeah, kicking it off with the benchmark table. Today we're introducing Gemini 3, our most intelligent model that can bring any idea to life. Built on a foundation of state-of-the-art reasoning, Gemini 3 Pro delivers unparalleled results across every major AI benchmark compared to previous versions. It surpasses 2.5 Pro at coding, mastering both agentic workflows and complex zero-shot tasks. Jumping right into this table, we see some of the, it has all the heavy hitters. So Humanities Last Exam, ARC AGI 2, Amy 2025. I think the one, maybe I'm the most interested in here is like Terminal Bench 2.0, kind of Terminal Bench, in many ways, the successor to SweetBench, and Terminal Bench 2.0 being like the brand new release of it. So yeah, I mean, if you kind of take a look at this table at a high level, basically, bold here means that it's kind of state of the art, best in class. Gemini 3 Pro across the board kind of just is dominating. I think the only exceptions here are on Amy 2025, Claude Sonnet 4.5 being at 100%, kind of like matching the 100% of Gemini 3 Pro. I don't think that's super interesting just because, both of them are at 100%. And I guess even in this task, it's Amy 2025 with code execution. They kind of both max out with no tools. Gemini 3 Pro is at 95%, and Claude Sonnet 4.5 is at 87%. And the other one here is SweetBench verified. So SweetBench verified, this is kind of the only thing in this entire column that is not bolded. Claude Sonnet 4.5 is at 77.2. Gemini 3 Pro is at 76.2. So definitely a benchmark topper. All right, so the pricing for this model at $2 per million input tokens and $12 per million output tokens. So this is for prompts that are 200,000 tokens or less. So if we hop into the Gemini API pricing, it's a very similar kind of pricing model, I think, to Sonnet, where kind of there's a threshold for 200,000 tokens, and once you go over 200,000 tokens, you kind of pay double the cost. And for Gemini 2.5 Pro, which was the previous model, is now 1.25 per million tokens. So Gemini 3 Pro, we're talking about $2 versus 1.25. So, definitely significantly more expensive. And then if you compare it to Gemini 2.5 Flash, so there is no Gemini 3 Flash model yet. This is significantly cheaper. So, and I think we would expect the Gemini 3 Flash to launch at sometime in the next like I don't know, month, 2 months or something like that. And I think one interesting thing to call out is uh, in that table, in that benchmarking table, the only kind of model that was comparable, or the only model. I mean, I guess there are definitely models that are comparable, but the only model that like outdueled Gemini 3 in any of those benchmarks was Sonnet 4.5. And Sonnet 4.5 again has the same pricing structure, but it is more expensive. It is 50% more expensive, $3 instead of $2 compared for input tokens compared to Gemini 3. So I think the comparable thing here is maybe, you can think about Gemini 3's pricing as sitting somewhere between Haiku 4.5 and Sonnet 4.5, basically like directly in between. Okay, so Gemini 2.5 Pro came out a while ago. So, it came out all the way back March 25th, 2025. And I think, at this point in November 2025, it definitely feels a little bit dated. Yeah, I don't think I know that many people that were using Gemini 3 or sorry, Gemini 2.5 Pro or Gemini 2.5 Flash as like a coding agent. Where I definitely know people who are driving like coding agents using obviously like Sonnet 4.5, Haiku 4.5, and then also, like GPT-5 codecs, GPT 5.1 codecs, GPT-5 codecs, models like that. Okay, so there are a few other things in this announcement that I think might be interesting for some people. So they also released what they're calling Google Anti-Gravity. This is basically a new IDE you can have a VS Code for. Yeah, so some comments on vibe coding. Basically, how Gemini is a very good model at doing sort of this full stack development, text to website or text to app. Yeah, so that's basically it in terms of the actual release notes. I think here, this blog is pretty light on details. Really, it's like very heavily focused on benchmark scores. No more reading. Let's like actually play around with the models. Again, these things really take time to kind of suss out and like vibe check. But I think just, if these benchmark scores actually do hold up, I think we should be able to tell kind of immediately the difference between Gemini 3 and Gemini 2.5 Pro when using the model to drive a more complex agent, kind of like a deep research agent that's going to like manage states, manage to-do lists, call web search tools. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that and see what we can find out. All right, so I hop over to the ADE. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just create a deep research agent here. Obviously, you can do this all through the API, but just for sake of time, it's a little bit faster for me to do it inside of the ADE. Yeah, you can see that we default the model actually to Sonnet 4.5 just because we found that Sonnet 4.5 kind of is generally speaking like a very safe, and very very good default for most use cases. But yeah, let's swap this over to Gemini 3. And the prompt I'm going to do here, the prompt that I like to do in these deep research settings is I actually like to ask about Postgres and pgvector because I think the answer to like why pgvector, so there's like kind of this vector search library, why it's not part of the actual official Postgres package, it is kind of nuanced and requires kind of searching the web, searching kind of like forum posts and things like that. So a very good model will actually kind of slowly explore this and kind of like uncover more layers of the onion through its deep research. So it's a very kind of deep research suited task. Whereas kind of like a weaker model will maybe like get lazy and kind of only scratch the surface and then like can prepare the result for you and just throw it back. So yeah, let's go ahead and like write a prompt for this. Okay, so I'm gonna keep the prompt pretty simple. Just why is pgvector not part of Postgres? And I think actually before I run this, I'm gonna just side by side Gemini 3 Pro and Gemini 2.5 Pro, and we can kind of watch them. All right, so these agents are completely identical, nothing different except for Gemini 3 on the left and then Gemini 2.5 Pro on the right. So let's give this a shot. Oh, let's turn the reasoning on so we can see it. Okay, so off the rip, I guess on the left, Gemini. Um, okay, so I mean, I think it's pretty obvious immediately that Gemini 2.5 Pro just did not really follow the instructions of the deep research agents. Gemini 2.5 Pro, yeah, it basically just examined the query. What is the query? Why is PG vector not part of Postgres? Created one search, and the search the search was literally like, why is PG vector not part of Postgres? It got some results back, and then basically just immediately returned, a deep research report. On the other hand, Gemini 3 is still running. I think, if we had Claude 4.5 Sonnet or something side by side, I think Sonnet 4.5 would also be running. But yeah, Gemini 3 still running as it should be. At this point, it has done like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so in total, it did 10 tool calls versus on the right side, in total, it did a single tool call, a single web search, and the web search was literally just why is PG vector not part of Postgres? So doing the deep research was basically just putting the query putting the query directly into a web search function. All right, so taking a closer look at the actual agent that ran, I mean, I think if we're going to dissect this, it's a pretty good deep research job. I think the agent understood that the very first thing it needed to do was to actually reset the research. It's actually not entirely necessary because by default the agent starts with, in this case, it starts with like an empty research plan. So if you look at like the reset research tool, take a quick look at this. You can see that the description for the tool is basically to reset your research state when you have a topic to research. If continuing on the same topic, do not use this tool. So this tool is actually really meant to be run in the case that the agent is doing deep research multiple times. So if the agent is like doing deep research and then it finished a whole deep research session and then the user says like, okay, I'm no longer interested in, if PG vector, why PG vector is not part of Postgres. I'm now more interested in, what is like the best hotel to stay at in Osaka or something. Then the agents would call the reset research tool. So I think, if the agent had been smart enough, it probably would have realized that it was starting at the very beginning of the conversation. It didn't really need to do this. But better safe than sorry. Then the very next thing it does is it creates a research plan. The pretty good plan could have definitely been a little bit more detailed, but it was totally fine. Okay, so then you can see it does an initial set of web search. So it searches for Postgres philosophy versus core extension model. So what's the other query? Um, what is PG vector Postgres extension status? So kind of two like very similar queries. It gets back some results, and the next session it actually does both a memory edit and then it also does three web searches in parallel. So we look at the memory edit, we can see that it's using the memory tool to edit its to do plan. So if you look at the research plan, decide to insert text, step one, step two. Okay, so what did this actually do? Okay, this is definitely a mistake. So the agent, instead of editing the research plan to basically edit. So I think ahead of time, it looked like this. This is kind of like what it looked like before. And then the agent decided instead of just going in and like editing these as a human would, a human might come in here and do this. The agent instead kind of just like inserted a whole duplicate and a duplicate set that has like the check mark. But obviously, what that ended up doing is that now you have kind of a messy to-do list where the to-do list or the research plan basically has like empty to-dos and the duplicates with the checks. Definitely going to dock points here. I think well, let's actually try running it with like Sonnet 4.5 and see if it makes the same mistake. I don't think it will. Okay, so let's actually try the exact same thing, but let's try it now with Claude Sonnet 4.5. Sonnet 4.5, the default here. Let's just give this a spin and let this run and see what happens. Okay, so immediately you're seeing that Sonnet did not kind of make that. I would call it like a mistake somewhat of clearing the research report. Um, Instead, it just goes directly to calling the research plan. Let's take a look at the research plan and see what this looks like. Okay, so similar amount of steps. So step one, two, three, four, five. Similar level of detail to the Gemini 3 one. Okay, so if you recall, the Gemini 3 one, I think in total had about like 10 tool calls ish. So let's go ahead. Oh, okay, so we can actually see that there was an error that happened in one of the tool calls. So yeah, so Sonnet kind of created the research plan, then it did two web searches, and then it actually tried to do two memory edits in parallel. Let's see what happened here. So slight formatting issue, kind of a leading forward slash here, and then it also had the same issue with the other one. So in both cases, Sonnet noticed that he needs to fix the path, called the exact same thing without the path. These two things edited fine. So it basically edited both the citations block, and then you can see it's editing both still. So editing citations, editing plan. Let's see, calling tools, calling more tools. All right, so it finally wrapped up. Well, I guess it's not quite done yet, but let's take a look. I mean, let's jump straight into the research plan, see if. Okay, perfect. So Sonnet 4.5 did not really have any of the issues here that Gemini 3 had, where it did not duplicate any of uh, the kind of the to dos here. It just kind of like properly edited them to be marked as complete. You know, the research citations scratchpad looks totally fine. Nothing wrong here. And yeah, I mean, I think already this report is looking a little bit longer or more extensive than the Gemini 3.0 one. All right, so I had to cut there because it ended up being pretty long. So yeah, I mean, I think we kind of thought the Gemini 3 one was good because we were seeing it side by side with the Gemini 2.5 one. But I think, to be completely honest, like comparing this to the Sonnet 4.5 one, I think this one just, at least at first glance, looks significantly better. It just looks significantly more detailed, more deep, as it should be for deep research. A lot of embedded citations here. You have like citations at the very bottom. If we hop over the Gemini 3 Pro, you can see that there's not actually any citations, even though adding citations is part of the instructions. And then actually, one thing I didn't really notice earlier is that Gemini 3 Pro did not actually use the research citations scratchpad area. It kind of just was modifying the research plan, and then as we were talking about, it didn't really like modify it that like correctly. I mean, it did an okay job, but it definitely like messed up. But yeah, I guess we could say, in this, you know, n equals one example of comparing Gemini 2.5 Pro to Gemini 3 to Sonnet 4.5. I think pretty obvious that Gemini 3 significantly better than Gemini 2.5 Pro. The Gemini 2.5 Pro one, I mean, this was just like definitively the worst. I mean, it basically just completely failed at the task, right? It just uh, it did very very shallow research, not deep at all, versus Gemini 3, significantly better. But comparing it side by side with Sonnet 4.5, I think specifically, for the prompts that were set up in this specific deep research agent, so we could definitely tune it to try to like make Gemini 3's performance better. But within this agent, swapping out the model from 4.5 to 3 Gemini 3 Pro would definitely cause some sort of like performance regression. I think Sonnet 4.5 just definitely within this agent scaffold that we had set up just works significantly better. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to test Gemini 3 versus Sonnet 4.5 inside of a coding scaffold. So I'm going to use Letta Code. This is actually a research preview that we've been building, which we'll have a separate video on very soon. But basically, it's a model agnostic frontier agent harness. So you can think about it in many ways as like if you're familiar with Claude Code or other kind of terminal based or CLI based agent harnesses. Very similar to that, except the agents are self improving. So they can edit their own memory, they can learn over time. You can use the same agent for, you know, foreseeably forever in the same coding project, as opposed to kind of like throwing the agent away very frequently, as you do with like most coding agents. But most importantly, for this experiment, Letta Code is model agnostic, so we can use any model under the hood. I generally prefer to use Sonnet 4.5 when I am using Letta Code. So I'm very familiar with how Sonnet 4.5 works inside of Letta Code. But because it's model agnostic and it works with any model that works inside of Letta, we can use Gemini 3 to drive Letta Code very easily. And it basically will look just like Claude Code, but using Gemini 3 under the hood. So yeah, let's give it a shot. I think I actually opened a very low hanging fruit issue here called "Don't show all models by default." It's actually a very simple thing to do. Definitely within scope, very one-shottable for any sort of coding agent. So we're going to use Letta Code to attempt to solve this, and we're going to first try it with Sonnet 4.5 and see the result. And then we're also going to try it with Gemini 3. And I think, both models hopefully should be able to solve this no problem. But we'll see if there's any sort of like discrepancy or differences in like how they solve it. Oh, and I guess just to be clear, if you want to kind of like replicate this yourself at home, to install Letta Code, it's pretty simple. Just npm install Letta Code. And then all you need to do is set a Letta API key, which you get from app.letta.com. And app.letta.com is already configured with all the different models. You can use whatever model you want, including Gemini 3. And if you're self-hosting Letta, you can also wire Letta Code against the self-hosted Letta server as well. All right, so I booted up a fresh agent here using Gemini 3, and yeah, we can actually see if we copy this agent ID. So we can look at this agent in the ADE. Yeah, nothing has happened yet, but you can see that the model set to Gemini 3 Pro, and then the persona is Letta Code. So yeah, Letta Code pretty different from other terminal agents in that all the agents they have persistent memory, and when you create new agents by default, you're kind of just creating new threads. But the memory of your agent is actually shared with every other agent over time. And generally speaking, the way I use Letta Code is I actually just use like one agent continually, and that agent kind of learns more and more about me and the project I'm working on. And then if I switch projects or like go to a new directory, then I'll create a new agent that has some memory blocks shared. So like the human and the persona block. So information about me as a programmer, information about the agent and how I like it to behave. That's stored inside a persistent memory that's shared across all the agents. And then things like information about the project, that's kind of just stored directly on the agent that is working inside of that project. Okay, so hopping back to the GitHub issue, I think all I'm really going to need to do here is say something like new feature request. And I just copy this in. There we go. And yeah, let's just hit enter and see what happens. Oh, okay. I am gonna actually just put this in YOLO mode. I don't think anything dangerous is gonna happen in this case, so I'm just gonna let it run. Okay, so this is pretty interesting. Gemini here is actually being pretty proactive in very early on, kind of noticing that the project block, like the project memory block that I was talking about, that kind of describes the project that I'm working in, was empty and had like a to do in it. So actually, before it really started to do anything, you can see that the agent decided to update the memory block, which was right here. So yeah, we can actually hop. It's a little bit easier sometimes to look at the stuff in the ADE. So if we hop back to the ADE, so if you hop back to the ADE, I mean, we're actually going to also be able to watch this coding agent work live inside of the ADE as well. But we can see the project. Okay, so we can actually see that the agent, the agent, I think this is kind of similar to the deep research example. The agent had good intentions, but the agent kind of messed up a little bit. So what the agent should have done is the agent should have edited the project block here. There was this existing project. So what I was describing was that, you know, this agent, when it was created, it was initialized with a project memory block. And this memory block says currently empty, important to do on first boot up. If you see an agent's MD file or a Claude MD file, or even a README file, and I guess there's a typo here, read that file and then distill the knowledge into this memory block. So Gemini inside of the Letta Code agent, it did see this memory block and it did kind of read it and understand, oh hey, I have to go look at the Claude MD file and I have to go read that first before I get started. So it did that, but then it, instead of editing this memory block project, it created a brand new memory block underscore project, and it kind of like wrote to that memory block instead. And this actually, this is the content that is inside the Letta Code repos Claude.md file. So it did the correct job, but it definitely, yeah, made a slight mistake here in kind of not editing the memory block, but creating a memory block by accident. So yeah, you can see if you kind of like backtrack to the memory tool call that the agent did, the agent called create instead of modify. So that was kind of like the wrong command. It should have actually uh, it should have actually like edited or modified the existing block instead of creating a new one. But yeah, so like hopping back to the terminal, I think we missed a lot that was going on. So we can kind of skim this. You can see, that we have the reasoning traces. It's examining the model selection, doing a lot of stuff. I mean, this is a pretty simple feature request, so it really shouldn't be that difficult to implement. Um, and yeah, we can tell that it didn't actually, it main you can tell that it maintained a to-do list as well. Um, but it didn't really ask for much like feedback in the loop. It kind of just like one-shotted it, which I think is fine in this case because this example, it's pretty simple. It's a very simple feature. It didn't really need much specking. All right, so the final answer here is the model switcher has been updated to show only the top 5 frontier models by default. Okay, it's pretty funny. I guess we'll see what models does Gemini think are the top 5 frontier models. And then, yeah, it has like a show all models viewer. Okay, so it modified, can I check this? Okay, so it modified 3 different files, modify app, components. Okay, so if you take a look at the actual edits it made to the file, um, all right, so we can see that, what it's doing is okay, so actually, this is not really what I asked for, right? I think, okay, so what I asked for in the GitHub issue is I'm basically saying, like, okay, so to be clear, just to show you what I'm talking about, there's a model selector here. And again, Letta Code, model agnostic. So there's a ton of models you can use with Letta Code. I mean, I think this is like, Letta Code is compatible with like OpenRouter, for example. So, you can basically use whatever model you want as long as that model is good at tool calling. No guarantee that the model will work well, right? It has to be good at tool calling, good at coding. But the models we put down here are generally the models that we've tested. At least they work okay. And some of these models work very, very well. But basically, this is a ton of models. So what we wanted to happen was we wanted it to be that in the model switcher, we only show the 5 so like about 5 frontier models. So that would be some selection of models, like Sonnet 4.5, Opus, Gemini 3 Pro, GPT 5.1 Codex. Yeah, and then if you kind of hit this show all models thing, it will show all models and list expands to everything. Okay, so actually, this approach that Gemini did or Gemini 3 did, it's basically slicing the list. So it's just showing the top five as in like literally top five in the file. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess let's see what this actually looks like in practice. Okay, so what we're gonna do to test this is just run Letta from source, see the modified code. Again, with Letta, like by default, you're gonna launch into the same agent if you're in the same project. So we're seeing that we kind of just restored the conversation history from the same agent that was doing the work. And yeah, I mean, okay, I think this is yeah. I mean, I think this is fine. Um, I think going above and beyond what I would have liked to see is so I think what a human would have intuited is that like what we really should have done here is inside of the models file that kind of stores all the models, we should have added some sort of like field in the JSON that is something along the lines of like featured, Boolean flag featured, and if Boolean flag featured is on, then we will render that model in the window, and then if it's not, we won't. Right now, I think the way this was implemented is a little bit messy, or the way that Gemini 3 implemented it is a little bit messy because it basically will just like rely on the ordering of this list to be good, which I think is totally fine. I think it's very doable. It's a little hacky, but it works. But yeah, let's actually try Sonnet now and see if Sonnet does a better job. Okay, so I created a brand new model here. Again, I'm running from source. If you're using this yourself, you can just if you npm install it, you can just run Letta. But I'm running from source here just so I can see the changes. And I'm gonna run it with model Sonnet 4.5. And I'm just gonna copy over the exact same user input message that went to the previous agent from the ADE. All right, so I went ahead and I grabbed the prompt that went to the previous model or the previous agent, and so I created a fresh agent. This agent is no longer on Gemini 3. This agent's running on Sonnet 4.5. Just gonna go ahead and hit enter to send that prompt in. And again, we can, similar to the last time, we can look at this agent inside of the ADE instead of the CLI. So yeah, if we hop over here, I believe this is the same agent. All right, so yeah, we can see the agents running. And again, the reason this is possible, like the reason we can look at this agent running from both the terminal and then also the ADE is because in Letta, all your agents, they kind of run in a server, right? So in something like Claude Code, the agent is actually like kind of living inside of the Claude Code process running on your computer. And all the state is kind of trapped inside the Claude Code process. Versus in Letta, the terminal is just an interface to interact with the agent. So is the ADE. It's just one of many interfaces interacting with using the API to interact with this agent. But this agent is running on a server, so it allows you to build these applications on top of the Letta API, where you can very easily have many different interfaces that interact with the same agent. So in this case, both the AD and the CLI or the terminal are two ways we're interacting with it. Okay, so yeah, exact same prompt. And if you go back to the agent, all right, so let's actually take a little bit of a closer look at what this agent is doing as it's going. So, the agent saying the user wants to implement a new feature for the model switcher. They want to show only about 5 frontier models. Yep, that's correct. Add a show all models option. And then when the show all models option is selected, expand the list to show all models. Okay, so it's kind of grokking the code base, looking around, kind of check the models out JSON file. That's the right thing. Okay, and then it's reasoning. I need to modify the model selector. Yep, that's correct. I also okay, yeah, thi- this is exactly kind of what I was talking about. A good model should intuit, right? So Gemini, I think, kind of went ahead and just implemented this like truncation method. Uh, Sonnet, on the other hand, or Sonnet 4.5, it is kind of deciding that actually maybe the best way to do this is to add a new field to models.json and to make this what is determining what is going to get showed in the truncated view of the model selector. So immediately off the rip, when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking this already looks better than what I saw before. Especially if it's one thing to think it, it's another thing to implement it. But yeah, let's see. So it kind of it marked out on its to-do list. There's a few items. First, add the frontier flag, then update the model selector. Okay. Okay, I guess it's like having a little bit of a dilemma here of what models actually count as frontier, or what is it going to choose to put in here. Okay, so decided on Sonnet 4.5, Gemini 3 Pro. Okay, very generous. Opus 4.1, Haiku. Okay, I'm not sure if I'd put Haiku up there, um, but yeah, I mean, I think this is it's a totally fair list. But I guess it's not really the important part. The more important part is whether or not it did this flag properly. So I assume that this already finished. Yeah, we were reading it for a while, so it's already finished. Okay. Yeah, let's see. So immediately we can see, this the agent went in and properly modified this file. If we look at the models.json, yeah, so it went ahead and like went in and added the isFrontier flag. You can tell that it didn't actually like exhaustively add isFrontier true and false. So it's kind of picking up on the fact that, you know, is default had the same pattern. And yeah, I mean, I think what's left is to just see if this actually works. All right, so I'm running from source again. Let's see, model. Okay, yeah, this looks pretty good. Perfect. Um, yeah, I mean, I think this works great. So let's actually try changing this. Okay, let's try using GLM. Okay, so we swapped it to GLM. Again, Letta Code, fully model agnostic, so it's very easy to swap between open source or open weights and closed weights models. And when you do swap models, you're like retaining the entire history, right? It's not like you're kind of wiping the model as a consequence of switching, or wiping the agent as a consequence of switching. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, worked pretty well. Um, yeah, why don't we go ahead and can I push these changes for me? Thanks. Okay, so I mean, this is a real ticket, so might as well go ahead and commit and push the changes. Okay, so in the meantime, I actually want to go back and double check that I didn't miss anything in the Gemini 3 Pro. I want to make sure that I did not miss it reasoning potentially about adding the flag to the models. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think, it is what I remembered, which is that like Gemini 3 didn't really like think at any point in time that it should potentially put like a flag in. I think Claude 4.5 Sonnet or Claude Sonnet 4.5, 4.5, it kind of picked up on the fact that like in the JSON file, we were already using like some sort of like Boolean flags in there for various things. And it decided to kind of like adopt the same pattern and add a new Boolean flag for like quote unquote is frontier. So yeah, as expected, Gemini 3 didn't really ever kind of put two and two together and decide to do this via some sort of flag, by like picking up on the fact that Boolean flags were already inside of the JSON file. Instead, kind of just immediately jump to I've got the initial list of the frontier models determined. I'm just going to use the top entries as a guide. So yeah, I think again, just like A being these two models side by side, benchmarks are very different from coding and practice. Obviously, this example I was doing, it was very simple PR. But I feel like even with the simple PR, we kind of saw the difference between two models. Like both of them technically followed the instructions. I don't think my instructions were super clear, but comparing like Gemini 3 Pro versus Sonnet 4.5 in this very specific example, I would definitely say that Sonnet 4.5 gave a better result. And this is like in contrast to Gemini 3 Pro, being better than Sonnet 4.5 at Terminal Bench 2.0. So again, I think your mileage might vary with these sorts of models. I definitely would not say that the model kind of crushing a benchmark or crushing a coding benchmark immediately means that the model is significantly better at coding. I'm not saying that Gemini 3 Pro is not better than Sonnet 4.5. It's definitely cheaper, but I'm not saying it's also not better at certain tasks. Just as an example, with this one coding task I kind of pulled up, yeah, Sonnet 4.5 gave a better result. So yeah, I think I'm gonna end the video there. Yeah, so hopefully you had fun watching me mess around with Gemini 3 Pro, compare it to Sonnet 4.5 Live, on both that deep research task and then also the coding task. I think TLDR here is, you know, benchmarks don't tell the full story. But either way, super excited to see more frontier models come out, especially at competitive pricing. And yeah, I think it's super exciting and fun to play around with these models. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Thanks.